Everybody, I'd like to call this special workshop to order this morning. First, are we in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we are.
Make the roll call for me, please.
Certainly. Mr. Brown?
Walking in, right?
Mr. Harkins?
Here.
Mr. Ames?
Here.
Mrs. Becker?
Here.
Mr. Lennox?
Here.
Mr. Stanford?
Here.
Mayor McCann?
Here.
Sir, we're just missing Councilman Brown.
Okay, he's on the way. Today's workshop discussion will be on the Mid-Island Tract, which we need a name for pretty shortly. Brian had a couple names last night, but we didn't like them all, so none of them made any difference. It was easy along the way. Today we'll start out with Jen Ray. We'll start on the capital projects. Manager will tell us the update on with MSK on the Mid-Island Tract. Jennifer.
Byron, who's the project manager for the Mid-Island District. I want to thank council, Mark, senior staff, and the community for being here today to let us share this exciting project. As you know, we started this project in August with a town council workshop to get your thoughts and also with robust stakeholder engagement. And most recently, we were before you in February, where we discussed the analysis and programming, as well as some of the initial thoughts on what was to come. And today, I hope you can tell, I'm really excited that we're here to talk about both the initiative area from the initial standpoint. It's a little bit a step or two behind the park, or the track, excuse me, because that one is, the thoughts came out much clearer, so we were moving faster on that one, and the redevelopment strategy, we're on the initial thoughts. You'll hear that, and see and hear that we heard you, that the consultant team listened to both council and the community, and they have plans that are reflective of what our community desires to see happen in this area. And we want to get your reaction to that today, and then hopefully come back to you this summer to get approval to move forward into the next round. So with that, Mayor, if it's okay, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Kinzelman and Andrew Overbeck with MKSK to lead us through the discussion.
Just before you start, Brian, this meeting will probably run until about 11:30. If we have time, we will have appearance by citizens. If we do not have time, we will not have appearance. Brian?
Good morning, council members, staff, and town manager. Jennifer.
Brian.
Thank you for all your hard work, and Ann. For quite some time, we've begun looking at the district as a whole. The Mid-Island Tract, 102 acres of tract, is geographically and emotionally the center of that area in many ways. We have advanced the park a little bit ahead of the tract, which is predominantly a park, ahead of the district as a whole. So this district review is an interim. The park is much further along. We'll talk about budgeting for the park and phasing as we get into maybe our next meeting sometime later in the summer. Again, we want to, as Jennifer suggested, recap the engagement that we've been through. We've listened to not only this body, but the public through many vehicles, all great comments and a lot of robust involvement. We'll talk about the interim of the redevelopment district, if you will, redevelopment strategies for the district, but a fairly well-baked concept for the Mid-Island Tract itself. And then we'll open it up to discussion. And as always, no one's going to hurt our feelings by making comment or asking questions. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Andrew, let him go through the district as a whole. Stay there, I'll bring the controller over to you, and then we'll go back to the track.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here today, and want to sort of recap, since it has been a couple months since we've gotten together. So I've got some things we've probably seen before, but we wanted to sort of bring that back and remind folks where we started. Obviously, there's a lot of great planning that's preceded this work that you all have done as a community. We want to make sure that's folded in here and you see that in this work that we're doing together. And we also had a lot of engagement last summer, beginning in August, different things that happened out on the Mid-Island Tract. And I think one of your highest, responding surveys that you've done here in the town, as well as a number of stakeholder sessions that really helped to shape the conversation and the work that we've done here together. You can see here the 100+ stakeholders, representative of sort of all manners of input and knowledge and experience in this part of the island. Had a great chance to have one-on-one conversations with a lot of people, group meetings with some of the historic neighborhoods back earlier this year as well. So taking all of that into account as we move forward, here's some pictures of some of those events that happened as part of the open park days. Really good chance to get to know people, have some open conversations about what's happening. But I wanted to highlight a couple things here that are really, we kept going back to and saying, are we doing the right thing? We checked in on what input we got back from the community. And this chart comes from the survey responses about what's missing in this Mid-Island district. You can see park was far and away the top choice from the community. But people also started to talk a little bit more about the character of the place and what's missing there as well. So walkable streets, more dining, community events, shopping, workforce housing, sort of a knowledge that we needed a mix of uses in this part of the island, and that there were certain things we're missing. And they put comments sort of put a bit of a finer point on it. I'll start with the district summary below here. Walkability and safety. I know we've had a fair amount of traffic and vehicle pedestrian conflicts on some of these streets that we're looking at right now. So really important that we listen to that. So that walkability and safety is key. But I think also people sort of understand the shopping areas, the commercial areas are neglected, and they could be more than they are today. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Adding housing, affordable housing, workforce housing in particular, and doing something that's really emblematic of the character of the island. So we want to talk a little bit about that today as well. When it comes to the park, preserving nature and nature observation opportunities, primarily a passive park, and sort of put a finer point on that when we started to really pull all those engagement themes together. So hopefully you'll see these themes tied into some of the ideas and recommendations that we want to share with you this morning. But first and foremost, protecting and connecting open spaces and green spaces in the district, creating a walkable district that's connected and safe, and then looking at a potential mix of uses where we might be able to have some of your daily needs that are in walking distance of where you live, or even a place that you might park once and visit a number of different types of businesses or have different sorts of community experiences. So the need for housing, commercial, office, airport supporting uses. We'll talk about some of the market work that was done to support this. And then creating a district identity and really using the Mid-Island Tract as that catalyst, that heartbeat of this part of the island. And Brian will talk a little bit more about that. As we looked at the tract, these were sort of themes that came out as we looked at that, connecting this tract, Mid-Island Tract, to other green spaces, parks, trails, neighborhoods, and enhance those natural features, the Gullah history and culture that needs to be expressed here, the ability to maybe have an open air market, heritage garden, potentially some other commercial uses potentially in the park. Brian will talk a little bit more about that, but really something that serves the entire community, residents and visitors alike, and something that can be phased in over time, as we're talking, as Brian mentioned, about a big part of the island. How do you start to phase that in over time and make sure that fits with your overall budgeting going forward? So I just wanted to recap that before we really dove too far in. And I'll start by talking about the Mid-Island Initiative area. And again, we'll talk about development considerations, character and connections, and we'll talk a little about next steps before we move on to talking about the Mid-Island Tract. And please stop me at any time if you have any thoughts or questions. We'll go through these development characteristics, and I want to say we've worked really closely with our team. So it's not just MKSK. We have Kimley Horan on our team that's done market analysis for us. We also have Dover Colin Partners that we've been working with closely, especially as we start to think through these development considerations. And Victor's under the weather and couldn't be here today, but what I'm about to present are some of the things that Victor likes to talk about. And I think it's really important as we start to frame the conversation about what can change or what can evolve in this part of the district. So I think, this is a list of sort of do's and don'ts. And I think when we look at what the community's told us in terms of both walkability, connectedness, safety, but also the vibrancy of the place, the need to maybe reinvest in some of our commercial areas, which you have today, for the most part, is something that's on the right side of this list. It's surface parking lots, it's spread out, it's single use, it's isolated from our residential areas, it's auto-focused, and then some of it really could be anywhere in the world. It could be anywhere in the Southeast. It's not necessarily something that's maybe quite in character, in keeping with the character of the island. And so what we'd like to talk through is what we should have this look like. And green is the first word on this list. We want to create interesting and active places that are connected, walkable, and memorable. So a series of imagery just to start to let you know how we're starting to think about these spaces. First and foremost, green, and we'll talk about what that looks like and where those opportunities are. Close and cozy. I really take this to really be talking about those sorts of intimate gathering spaces. You may turn the corner and happen upon a plaza or some outdoor seating, or a place to, a beer garden like this, a place to gather as the community. So you think about these spaces that we're trying to create, they can't really take place in a parking lot. They are really neighborhood focused and very interesting spaces. You have some of them today. You have a mix of different uses. This is Harbor Town. Places to sit, places to gather, places where the community really can come together. And they're connected so that it's easy to make the decision to park one time, get out of your car, get on a bike, move around Hilton Head. And we see that when we sat outside having breakfast this morning. That's what you see, right? We want to create the same sort of opportunities in this part of the island. It should scream, get out of your car and walk around. And I live outside of Columbus, or I was outside of Columbus this weekend with my son down in a soccer tournament in Cincinnati and Marymount, which is a garden city that was built in the teens and 20s. And that's a place where you drive in, it's like, I got to get rid of this car and walk around and experience these great alleys and mews and public spaces that are interconnected around these buildings. I think evoking that same sort of feeling is what we'd like to see happen here. So again, it's something that says, get out of your car, walk around and enjoy the space and create those memories that I think in certain places of the island, we have that character and other places we don't. So that's just sort of a framing of the kind of character that we think is possible here as we start to look at evolving some of those uses that happen today. And you have good examples of that here on the island. Shelter Cove being one of them. You have a mix of park space, residential, retail, commercial, restaurant. All of those uses sort of work together. And I mentioned Harbor Town before, same thing. You have all of those things sort of intimately working together. It's a place where people want to spend time, a place for people to enjoy, and we see an opportunity to do the same sort of things here. We looked elsewhere, working with Victor and his team. Old Town Bluffton is another, great local nearby example of pedestrian-oriented architecture and streets. And, they've got small streets interior to those blocks that create that walkability, but also these great, spaces. You turn the corner and you might have something like the sort of outdoor patio and where they have live music in the evenings. That sort of surprise you, and those are the kind of places I think that are missing. Lion in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, again, low country architecture. What's amazing about this is, and you see the different types of housing and different uses here, your daily needs are all within a walking distance of your front porch. you know, and I think that's something that's pretty special and pretty unique there. Palmetto Bluff, again, also over in Bluffton, how they work with historic landscape and nature that's there, creating really, I think, unique residential opportunities, but also what we've started to call sort of neighborhood hubs, places where you sort of gather. So it might be a handful of shops that sort of pop up at these sort of nodes of activity throughout Palmetto Bluff and really create a unique place. So again, mixing those uses in can be done in a lot of different ways. Hale Village Center down in Gainesville, Florida. This is, you know, primarily a residential development, but at its core, it has this mixed-use center that has shops and restaurants and gathering places where they have farmers markets and festivals and events. So again, it's a way to sort of have a place where the community can come together, and you see again a variety of different types of housing that provide some density and other types of residential typologies that are missing here in the island. And then finally, Seaside, again, a very walkable, people-centered design, human-scale architecture, a lot of different types of uses. It manages to be a place where people live and people visit as well. So they've done that in a way, again, by making it people-focused, getting people out of their cars and letting that development serve a lot of different people that are there either for the day or they live there full time. So those are some of the things that we started to think through as we look at the opportunities for evolving different types of uses in the district, and perhaps, you know, taking a fresh look at some of the residential that's around the Mid-Island District as well. So what we really start to look at is, again, we wanted to create, in conversations with town staff, create, again, another sort of check and balance to how we do this work. So first and foremost, we want to protect and enhance what's there today. So that's the people, the neighborhoods, the natural environment, the preserves and parks, the parkway character that is in this district. There are things we need to really use as building blocks. Second, we want to connect people, open spaces, neighborhoods, and really create community gathering places, community hubs within the Mid-Island District. And I think, you know, even after some conversations we've had the last 24 hours, we probably have some additional neighborhood hubs and some other neighborhoods we need to include in this. And we will, again, work in progress. But we think there's a great opportunity there. And then finally, evolving. What's our future land use in this area look like? What is the potential for a mix of uses, potential residential infill, and then what should those standards be? Because I think everyone has a very clear expectation of what things should be. What those standards are that guide it are really important as we go ahead. And so we'll have recommendations on that as well. So as a starting point to thinking about the district, and again, I think we may expand this up to Bagall, but you know, we wanted to think about what are the historic neighborhoods, where are we in terms of these green spaces and historic places we need to connect together. So again, really a key starting point for looking at this district. We have had a chance to talk with the state of South Carolina and the FAA about the airport considerations, both in terms of the noise contours you see here, but also the potential use and height, building height around this area, and again, what those allowances will be. As a starting point, we had a really good conversation. What happens next is looking at potential changes in use and what those could look like. They have sort of a development tool. It's an online tool. We can plug, you know, as we go forward, town can plug those changes into that and sort of see what regulations come back. So again, we have to start from what would we like to see, and then continue to have conversations with them. But we have had a very productive opening set of conversations. Obviously, looking at existing zoning, sort of what's there today. But in some cases, really, we're more focused on what those land uses are. And where do we go forward from here? How might we simplify this map? And so we've got a couple places where we're suggesting we do some simplification and start to think through what's the kind of development we'd like to see happen here. We'll also talk a little bit about existing residential areas and how those can start to maybe harness the value of their property and have some housing that adds to the overall needed supply on the island. Also wanted to take a moment and just remind folks that we've also done a market study. So when we look at this work together, there's analysis that we do, there's stakeholder input, community feedback. We also met with folks like the FAA in the state of South Carolina. We're also doing some analysis about what could be, what's the overall demand in this area. So we know there's some need that we've heard from the community for housing. We know that there's a desire to have a different kind of retail. And so we look at what the demand capacity is, just to make sure that what we're showing and what we're thinking about makes sense and it's supportable in the marketplace. It's not saying that all of this should or could be built, but it does say that there's a market support to this work that we're doing, and that we're not thinking about something that is never going to happen. So it's it's another piece of helpful information. And I think it's interesting not just to get hung up on these numbers or really focus too hard on those numbers, but really talking about the types of uses that are needed. So where you start to mesh together the need that the community has expressed with the market supportability. And I think it's interesting to look at the housing, that we're talking about a mix of different housing types that I think address a lot of community concerns. So detached and attached housing, market rate multifamily, but also active adult multifamily, senior care, and then income targeted. So what we're trying to do is show that there's a wide variety of housing types that are supported in the marketplace that also then strategically match up with the town's needs, especially as we start to think about retail. The retail that we're talking about, yes, it's brand new, but it's more neighborhood in scale. It's not big box stores. It's smaller destination type of retail that would be amenitized by connectivity and walkability and park space, these things that we're talking about. So it's more of an experience and less of a driving destination for the entire island. And then there's a lot of other uses here as well. I think the office is definitely a longer term play, although there's places where that might work, and we're starting to see some medical office and some other developments actually take place in the district already. Really identified in the market work that we did with Kimley Horn the need for light industrial warehouse, flexible commercial spaces. And so around the airport, we really think it's important to still have some of those uses. And so we'll talk a little about that. And then, there's obviously hospitality, and there's an ability there around the airport to probably also have some hospitality uses as well. So again, we're sort of taking all that into account. This is sort of a working draft of then where do we see these things happening? And so we've got sort of existing neighborhoods in orange. Those are sort of neighborhood hubs. I think we've got a couple more up toward Mitchellville that we need to add to that after some conversations yesterday. We've got Main Street out on sort of the modern classics site that the town owns right now, potential there. We have the Mid-Island Tract, and we have the airport. We're going to talk through each of these. And then really at that crossroads, the big purple, that's where we've got all the commercial centers today that are really starting, some of them in reinvesting, but I think some opportunities, maybe think about those a little bit differently. So again, a way of sort of framing the conversation and developing some thoughts here. But we really start all the way back at that green network. That's the formative piece, and how do we connect this up to those historic neighborhoods? So there's water courses we need to protect. There's preserves and potential park space. All of these need to be interconnected. Some of them are very connected today, but we think we can do a little bit of a better job as we start to maybe think about some additional green space. And then the green edges along the parkway. I think that's really important. We talked about that last time. That sort of 150-foot setback. It's probably a little hard to see at this scale of map, but we've sort of drawn that green ribbon on both sides of the parkway to have that sort of green edge along the parkway. That's a really important, consistent character to carry throughout the district. And then this is a lot on one diagram, so I'm going to break it down a little bit at a time. But we want to talk about all the different types of connections that exist here. So we'll walk through that a little bit at a time. Starting with the parkway, again, that green setback, that green edge really starts to create that park-like feel in the district and honestly the entirety of the island for that matter. And then we look at then the next level of streets. And this is Matthews, stem to stern is sort of your collector street. It's a connection. This is a place where we think we could take that character of having the multi-use path on both sides of the street. Again, very green. But again, it's that connector between neighborhood uses along Matthews primarily here. And then what we're calling park roads, these roads that really have park on either side of them. They are roads that ought to be very park-like in character, have a multi-use path, perhaps not just on the park side of that road, and really provide those connections to the important green spaces throughout the district. And then interior to the block. So as we start to think about changing the character of these commercial areas that are inside of the Mid-Island District, we need to start to create, instead of driveways, drive aisles, parking lots, things that start to look more like streets. So that's what you sort of see in these pink colors, are as you come off both Matthews, come off the Parkway, you enter into these sites as they potentially evolve and redevelop. These are become more neighborhood scale streets. You start to break down the scale of large parking lots, and you have something that looks like these images here on this slide that start to create some character inside, walkable character inside of those developments once you're sort of off the main streets. And then the pathway network. I think as we look at the Parkway writ large, we really, the goal being having multi-use paths on both sides of the Parkway. So we really want to make sure that character exists. Same thing on Matthews. And then, going down into Marshland, connecting through the Ashmore Tract with the trail to interconnect with the Mid-Island Tract, and then all the way up to Mitchellville Freedom Park, where you have some existing pathways there. Potentially some ways to walk around the Northridge Tract as well. And we've got this interconnected set of green spaces that enable people to get around the neighborhood in a different way, but also make the choice, if they want to sort of leave the car at home and be able to have some experience as they go to some new commercial spaces or visit some of the green spaces within the district. So again, these off-road, multi-use, internal path connections tying into the existing path network is super critical as we look at the district. And then improving these intersections. So we know we need to safely get across 278. Significant, opportunity there to make that crossing a lot better from one side of 278 to the other. But there's a lot of other smaller intersections as you go down Matthews, as you head up Dillon, as you get close to some of the other parks, as you go up toward Mitchellville, where we need to make sure we're getting people safely around the district as well. So really looking at where those conflict points are between vehicles and pedestrians, making sure that it's safe to be able to ride your bike or walk from one thing to another in the district. So really key importance that we'll be looking at there. So these streets start to give us some character to build on. So if we have a great green parkway, we have an interconnected system of green streets and pathways that connect our park spaces, our commercial areas together, where do we think we could start to evolve some land uses? And we'll start with sort of the mixed use character that we think is possible here in these purple areas as things change, as maybe property changes over. There's a desire to do something different than the big box parking lot oriented commercial spaces you have today. What could these things start to look like going ahead? So we talked a little bit here about the mix of uses that are potentially there, residential, restaurant, townhomes, maybe some office, potentially some institutional spaces, all sort of built around some open spaces that I think would be in the community. I think what we've done here too to get to some of these thoughts is start to look at the capacity of these sites, what the community desires are, what's supportable in the marketplace. And that's how we arrive at some of these densities that, again, I don't think this one's very different than the Main Street category you have today, but 12 to 18 dwelling units per acre. That's sort of below where I think, Harbor Town and other places are. But we think, in fitting with, we know we've got some height restrictions because of the airport, and looking at, you want these things to park themselves, have shared parking. It starts to dictate, how these things start to lay out. And then, of course, we've got that setback that we're trying to preserve 150 feet off the parkway as well. So really starting to think through what could work here and what's the character going ahead that's both supported in the marketplace, desired in the community, and again, can start to show where we can fit in this mix of uses, have active ground floors, have walkable streets inside of these parcels that make it more of a destination for the neighborhood and others that may be visiting this area. Around the airport, mentioned the market study really closely showed that we have a need for commercial and industrial warehouse type spaces on the island. That's sort of what's in there today. We do expect that this probably evolves a little bit as the airport builds a refreshed terminal, and they have some uses there that they're adding. There might be some hospitality uses that come into this, but commercial support services. We've seen already in this area a brewery sort of open up. So again, allowing for that sort of quirky mix of uses is okay. And those are the types of spaces where I think it's low cost. You can have a creative sort of startup type business that could locate in a place like this. And again, we're looking at an airport adjacency, so we're limited in terms of height, and the parking sort of dictated by other performance measures in this area, but it primarily is self-park depending on the use. And then the final category that we look at are opportunities for, in existing residential areas, could there be opportunities for additional infill? So again, we're talking about lower scale housing like we're showing in these benchmark imageries, single family, maybe some townhomes, some park under townhomes and cottages, parking handled on site, allowing for neighborhood commercial. So that's sort of the business in the home type of commercial space. There's been, I know, a lot of conversation as you've gone through the Gullah Geechee culture preservation report, different types of densities. So you have 4 to 8, you have 8 to 12, depending on where you are. We sort of put the top end in there for the sake of conversation today. But the bottom line is we think there's some opportunity if folks in those areas would like to be able to add some additional housing that's needed on the island. The eventual density and what that looks like and what those development standards look like is something that's sort of open for discussion. The idea is there, if people want to harness the value of their property, that there is an ability to do so. And I know the overlay has been something you all have been talking about for a matter of more than a matter of months. That'll still continue past today. But we want to sort of acknowledge that those conversations are happening, and there's an opportunity here, if desired, to add to that residential supply that we've identified in both the market and the public comments, that there's a need for that. So a place where that might be able to happen in addition to the mixed use sites that we've shown. So that's how all of this starts to come together. That's our thinking to this point. Looking at those systems of both green spaces, connected, interconnected network of streets and pathways, and how then does that start to inform redevelopment that could occur and evolve over time, and where those opportunities are throughout the district. Our next steps will be to have some conversation today with you all, start to think about final recommendations, bring that back to you in the summer, and that will have some recommendations for future town actions. So establishing that future land use map, looking at revising zoning if needed, establishing those development standards, and then creating redevelopment standards for key parcels going ahead. And that will really start to guide those conversations, because we've realized some of this is town-owned ground, some of it's ground that is owned by private property owners, and you need to have the ability to have those conversations and shape what certainly will change. Things aren't going to stay the same. What do we want it to look like in the future?
Drew, let me ask you a question about that. That's something that's been on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you got a lot of exciting ideas here, and we can all get fired up about it. But one of the big challenges that we face is that most of the land that we're talking about that is not the park site is privately owned.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is large traditional shopping centers.
Right.
And you're encouraging getting away from that. And I certainly accept that notion as being a worthy goal for us. But what tools are available to communities to promote that sort of conversion from a large parking lot shopping center down to a neighborhood feel? What are the tools that people use for these things?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think we're starting to, if you look at Port Royal today and what they've done, they're starting to respond to the market. So the market does shape some of this, which is really important. They're starting to take those larger boxes and subdivide them into smaller spaces. So you could argue that the market is already starting to push people in that direction, and starting to think through that with them, I think is really important. There's an interim step we've taken with some private property owners that operate sort of more traditional sort of commercial spaces, and that is to start to pick away at those drive aisles and start to turn them into things that look more like streets, having open spaces, outdoor seating added to those things. So I think there's some iterative things you could do, but really it starts with crafting that vision. And so we say, look, this is where we see opportunity, and enables you to go have a conversation with that property owner and say, all right, what is your view of the future? This is what we've talked to the community about. See where things overlap and mesh. I think there's other sort of more, other tools people have used which is acquiring the property, right? Sort of what happened at Shelter Cove, or working with someone who has a different vision for the future that's in the development game. So again, starting those conversations, I think you have to start from a point of the vision, and this is where the community, sees things going, and how do we get there is a critical next step.
Thank you.
So happy to take more conversation and comments here on where we're headed.
Just a quick summary as we're looking at that slide, it's not lost on any. Is the Mid-Island Tract and the park that be there. So as we know, we need to accommodate the traffic. Under separate action, much more detail, including those intersections. So we'll satisfy those issues. But that's the one's fault. That's just the way the towns develop over time, incrementally. So we think it's important to establish a center to the place, provide for the conveniences and the daily needs of the folks that live in these neighborhoods that are in the Mid-Island. We're trying to create a center that maybe has not been here in the past.
Excuse me, if I could have a follow-up question on Glenn's statement. The path of least resistance to affect this change would be to have, harmony of thought with the existing owners to move into a new direction. So a new owner, an existing owner is going to want to, when they think about possibly changing what they're doing from a service standpoint, from a retail standpoint, they're going to want to know how strong is the market behind that vision. So my question is, how robust is your market analysis? Is your market analysis going to be detailed enough so that an existing landowner, store owner could say, this direction could get legs. This direction could be successful.
Yeah, it's a good question. The market work that's been done to this point has been primarily around looking at trends in the region and the overall demand that's projected based on growth and what's missing in the marketplace. The next level of market analysis that you might do in conversations with the developer, we look at feasibility analysis of, all right, what does that look like when you're actually, developing a pro forma, and how would you build a mixed use, development or evolve to more of a mix of uses or adding residential. That's not something we're doing at this stage of the game, but that would be the next recommendation to move ahead with that would be to do market feasibility, which would be the next step.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman, these districts also typically redevelop over time and incrementally, and you've got to have a willing participant in the existing property owner, but that existing property owner is servicing leases that have different terms to them, have different businesses, some very viable, maybe some marginal. And this isn't necessarily a wipe the slate clean and start over proposition, though that's the way some redevelopments happen. But there's a way for us to grow under our britches, as they say, and incrementally redevelop these parcels so that in the end, we've got what is an authentic, walkable town center, not a 1970s model commercial strip center parking lot.
And I would argue the market's already starting to speak there, and whoever is doing that leasing is listening to that, because they've taken what was large spaces and they've subdivided those up into smaller leasable spaces. You have a grocery store that's coming back in as well, and it's one that is a little bit more local to here. So starting to see those market forces naturally evolving how he's using that space today, and I think we're going to continue to see that happen. But I would argue the market's already sort of pushing in this direction.
Alex, thank you. I guess I've got some follow-up comments to what Councilman Hawkins and Stanford have asked. But I want to first say that I'm really excited about this. The majority of this Mid-Island exercise is in my ward. With the exodus of some of the big box activity there, one would argue that it's been neglected for a while. So I'm glad to see that we're taking this one on first. One of the slides talked about protecting, and we're protecting the people, right? And I'm glad to hear that we're shifting a bit into developing a sustainable community neighborhood, in a sense, right? Kind of getting away from just retail, but offering up residential. And I think we have to continue to be very intentional about the need for more residents on Hilton Head, because it is a great place to live, right? And it starts to tackle our burden of a workforce at this point, right? So I would just offer that as we start to move along as far as density and land use, we also start to dive into the conversation of what it looks like from AMI standpoint, okay? And I thank Mr. Ames for doing a lot of homework and sharing with us. One of the things that I really took away from an article that he shared with all of us was some municipalities are saying 120% of the AMI and under. They're not looking at a range, 60 to 80, 60 to 100. They're saying 120 and under, okay? And that is really intriguing to me, because we are now looking at how we can put together a very mixed environment, okay? And no limitations, right? I think that's very important that we continue to go down that road. This area, okay, particularly Ward 1, is the most diverse area on Hilton Head from a land use standpoint, from an ethnic standpoint, from an economic standpoint. It's really a beautiful thing how it's evolved over time, and now it's our opportunity to enhance it, right? So I'm very pleased about the direction. The only thing that I would add, based on the comments that I've heard thus far, the next steps don't really talk about the economic portion, right? And I know it's down the road, but I want to say it out loud publicly that's important. We have to understand that we could change the colors all day long, but unless we've got money to make it happen, money to invest in this idea of sustainable community neighborhoods, it'll just be a lot of talk. So I'm just encouraging us as a council to really think out of the box here, not from a subsidy standpoint, but from an investment standpoint. Okay, that's where we really need to be going as we go through this exercise, and I think we'll be better off for it down the road if we think in that sense. So those are my comments, Mr. Mayor. And again, you guys are doing a great job thus far.
Thomas, everything?
I think the next steps are appropriate. The market analysis from 30,000 feet is also appropriate as a first step. I think I recognize that this will be driven by the market analysis done at ground level. And to the extent that we can invest, and that investment acts like a catalyst, very similar to what happened on Pope Avenue, I think this will be equally as successful.
Emmy?
I think right now, I'm listening, and I think that you guys have done a great job in terms of the planning. I look forward to it. I do agree that the market analysis, in terms of where a lot of this development springs up and starts to take off, will be important to see how that evolves over time.
David?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I think it goes without saying that I support enthusiastically the work that staff and the consultants have been doing. I think that you've parsed the challenges well. I support the idea of your attitude towards the roadways, the preservation of open space. I also support the notion that higher densities are necessary to make the mixed-use areas function and be viable for the private sector investment. I think there are probably 3 comments that I'll make that I think are structural. One, you use the word generic. And I think that's important for us to focus on. Hilton Head didn't get to where it is by being generic. And what I see here as sort of a fundamental premise of this is that we ought to be thinking local. Local opportunities for business, local opportunities for retail, and local opportunities for restaurants. That the attitude towards zoning and land use should discourage, to the extent that is possible, national organizations that are generic to all communities. So the scale of what you're anticipating is local. I think that it's important for us to have the attitude that we are creating opportunities for local businesses. Secondly, I am very concerned about a market research report that says there's a demand for a variety of housing and resort expansion, hospitality, and so on. I think that it is absolutely critical that we make a distinction between what a market report says the marketplace will support and what is good for this community. So in terms of housing, if it says there's 1,700 units possible, and you multiply that by 3, let's say you have 5,000 new people on this island, are those 5,000 people going to be people who are putting additional demands on the workforce, or are they going to be workers providing services to create the quality of life that we need in this community? So I think it is important for us as a council and as a community to recognize that as we build density in this community, we are also increasing population and the demand for services. And unless we acknowledge and face that fact today, we are digging ourselves deeper into a hole. So the third area is that if we are looking to increase density in an area to make it work from a commercial standpoint, I think we also have to acknowledge that the town is going to have to play a role to make that affordability work. And I think we are at the point in this community that we have to answer the question, how are we going to build a complete community, including the housing diversity that we need for this community to function? So I applaud the direction we're headed. And I think the planning exercise is excellent. But I think it is important for us as a community to acknowledge, in order for this to be implemented, we have to accept responsibility to make it happen. So my questions, and I don't know if they need to be answered today, is what is that future housing distribution that we need for this community to be successful? And then secondly, what is the town's role to make it all happen? How do we start the ball rolling? What are the obligations, the financial incentives, et cetera, to make it work? So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dave. Brian?
Councilman Ames, you said a mouthful there and couldn't agree more wholeheartedly. Those existing property owners, our town manager has made a career out of dealing with town of Hilton Head. Development corporation that could be set. Can and should be good for the community and vice versa, but it's got to be a conversation between two. We just can't turn over raw ground to developers and expect them to do what the community demands. So planning, not the last step. Inspirational and informative to the developer community. They're the gals and guys that are stepping up with their own financing, putting their futures, their company futures on the line. And assemblage. And sewers and parks all the time, because we're in the town business. We run a town. We got to invest in the things that are important to us. Housing is important to us. The right types of commercial are important to us, to the quality of our life, and we've got to be willing to step up and make that commitment. That's a non-political statement, mind you, but I mean, that's macroeconomics 101. So couldn't agree with you more. Stay tuned. We've got a lot more work to do, but we're out of the blocks, as it were.
Next section, move on.
Okay. Thank you. Brian?
Passing of the baton. Okay, now for the Mid-Island Tract. As mentioned in the district, key portion of this tract, of this district is the tract and vice versa. We're going to quickly go through the process. Again, we're further along on this than we are on the district. Our charge has been to create a best-in-class park, not just another addition to this wonderful park system we have, but a best-in-class, dare I say, monumental park experience. The park areas and the planned components, the programs will speak to that. The park improvements, we'll go incrementally through what is a large piece of property. This is 102.5 acres. Ashmore, which we couldn't help ourselves, but to link to this Mid-Island Tract is another 70-plus acres. So we're very fortunate to have this level of magnificent open space in the middle of our town. We also have benchmarked against other park developments on the island, in the region, nationally, so that we all understand contextually that this isn't something unique. This is all about creating the highest of quality parks and open spaces for our community. And then our next steps. First, the process. As Andrew suggested, we haven't forgotten all the great planning y'all have done, and this is a direct transition from that information. Town staff, by the way, has done an excellent job at going through this program and trying to adjudicate different uses into different parks. Jennifer and Taylor and Ann and Sean have been excellent partners to us, and this is as much their work as it is ours. Thank you very much. We've done the physical analysis of this piece of ground, understanding that in its most recent use, this was a golf course. Though it's largely green, this place needs to be restored before we do anything moving forward. It's got a series of ponds that were used largely for irrigation. Many of them are lacking in high water quality. We've got flood conditions. We've got storm surge conditions. So as you start to peel back the layers of the onion of what Mother Nature has given us, there are challenges and issues to be solved. So grossly, we have broken the program down into 3 uses: the civic and cultural uses, recreation, and the natural systems. We've heard from the community that they prefer a passive park here. We've got other places to put our active recreation, and again, town staff has done a great job of fitting active recreation into our other parks so that island-wide we can accommodate all needs and users. So we're not making this up as we go, though fortunately we've got experience in working in wonderful cities and towns and creating wonderful parks. But Councilman has suggested to us that we need to test this back against what are recognized national standards. We think it's important to understand that we have intentional design. We just don't create an open space and put a park sign out and call it that. It needs to be inclusive and welcoming to everybody. Sustainability and resiliency is baked in. We've got to be able to maintain it. It's got to be beautiful. It needs to fit the island character. It needs to be flexible over time. This isn't going to be a snapshot that carries on into the future. We'll constantly be remaking this park. Therefore, it is timeless. It needs to be branded and communicated. This will be a destination. And as I mentioned before, we're creating a center to the town. This is going to be a key component to that center in town. It certainly has a health and wellness component to it. We have to address climate change and sea level rise, and this is germane to this site in particular. It needs to speak to every user on the island. This is the backyard space for our native islanders that live in this neighborhood, literally physically the backyard to some of them. It also needs to speak to all the generations. It needs to be a place for old guys like me and for young children and families and everybody in between. And it needs to be democratic in the sense that it is welcoming to all. It's got something for everybody. It isn't exclusive, either inferred or stated. We have this wonderful tourist trade. This is a magnificent place for people to come and enjoy. We need to take advantage of it and advance this park as a place for ecotourism to augment our beautiful beaches and other places. We need to address the partnerships that can be brought to bear. How do we fund this? How do we operate it? How do we maintain it? It doesn't necessarily have to be all laid at the feet of the town to fund and to operate. Multi-benefits of infrastructure. We can create a park and also help the island-wide storm water issues and satisfy both invisible to most. Take advantage of technologies. and pop-up programs. Again, parks don't need to be stagnant. We can have activities and events that happen at the drop of a hat, food trucks, performances, exhibits. So it needs to be something for everyone. How we've broken this down with a compilation of program overlaid on physical constraints is generally this. Over half of the park is given over to this natural, or what I'm calling the eco park segment of it. That's where we have stormwater infiltration and storm surge. We've got some areas where we've got, dare I say, upland and dry ground where we can recreate. We've got places for civic and cultural activities and gatherings. Understand as well that we're looking to accommodate a 5-acre tract for the St. James Church relocation and its facilities, and that is in that lower right of the image adjacent to the Union Cemetery. And if you build it, you must accommodate those that come here. We do have to deal with automobiles. We don't want to route roadways through the park, but we need to bring automobiles to the park, getting people out of their cars and into the park. But we're attempting to keep that parking to the perimeter and keep the contiguous center of the park free of automobiles. So how does that all turn into a site plan? This is an overall look at the 102-acre tract that at this scale is difficult to understand. So I'll break it down into the incremental pieces. This is a bird's eye perspective, again, hovering over the Ashmore tract, looking to the northeast with the parkway at the lower edge. Dillon is on the left, Union Cemetery on the right, and it gives you a sense of the size of this piece of ground. We're blessed to have this size of park. It's also a challenge to pack these uses into 102 acres. It gets small in a hurry, and it's also large. Therefore, it's a maintenance and operations challenge for sure. So we've broken it down into, dare I say, bite-sized pieces. We've got 5 areas we'll show you more detail of. First is the heart of the tract. So we've mentioned the Mid-Island is the heart of the town. This is the heart of the town. And I think as such, it needs to be that wondrous central gathering place. This is the town's living room from where I sit. In plan view, that has an activity lawn, a great lawn that's between 1.5 acres and 2 acres of open space. That's maintained lawn for any number of events, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Gullah Days, anything that the island puts forth can happen in activity there. Community facilities, an observation tower so we can see this beautiful piece of ground from a higher elevation, not just from ground level, a sculptural fountain, and an event grove or a modest amphitheater for events and activities. First, the sculptural fountain. Again, this is in clear view from the parkway. So as we are stopped at traffic lights at Dillon and at Union Cemetery, we've got diagonal views into the park. Head on as you pass by the center of the park. The sculptural fountain is the annunciation that there is a place there. We've got copious examples as we've shared with you in the past. It could be something as simple as a large single water spire. It can be a piece of sculpture or art, and it can be water as art. And some of the traditional fountains we show here, Charleston and Savannah, are local examples. The Great Lawn, again, a place for daily exercise, open play, concerts, activities, art exhibits, art festivals, any number of things. Again, the town's front yard. An observation tower. This can be optional for sure. There's a lot of these issues we'll go through that are optional. There are also donor opportunities. We may find corporate or individual sponsors that want to, dare I say, buy that observation tower for sake of the town. Again, this places folks at a whole different elevation and observation point for not just the eco park, but activity that happens in the civic space as well. How big is that? How tall is that? Certainly, there's public safety that has to be considered at every turn. How much does that cost? That's all subject to further investigation, but there's something very dramatic and exciting about getting people off of grade and getting them perched up above the canopy. So you can see in this perspective sketch from that tower what you would see looking to the southwest, looking at the Great Lawn, looking the other direction to the Eco Park, being above the canopy, seeing the water bodies, and then into some of the cultural gardens and to the event grove. That is an area that is not meant to compete with Low Country Celebration, some of our bigger outdoor, or even some of the things that happen at Shelter Cove. But this is a great opportunity in a beautiful environment, off the beaten path, as it were, for weddings, small performances, recitals, poetry sessions, any number of small, more intimate events that is directly adjacent to the event lawn of the Great Lawn, but has got some intimacy to it. Also, accessed off of Dillon Road is this multi-use community facility, a place for receptions, gatherings, weddings, funerals, full food service that can be supportive of those activities. It can be freestanding food service as well, but town-owned, town-developed, and operated. And pedestrian bridges. This peninsula, if you will, looks to be an island from the southwest, but I think that we can bring civic architecture to the table as well. The upper left example is creating art out of something that has a legitimate function to it. That's moving people from one place to the other, so they don't have to all be prefabbed, off-the-shelf pedestrian bridges. We can make a statement and a piece of art with them. The basins, as I mentioned before, the ponding system there it does not have high quality water or wildlife for that matter. We're looking to interconnect many, if not all, of these ponds so that we have a natural flushing of the water system from the watershed that starts to the south of and west of Port Royal Plaza and flows through this site. Take advantage of that interconnectedness and create legitimate water bodies, not large puddles, and help with the aquatic growth. Also, to have water's edges, get people to the edge of the water, but not necessarily into the water. We've got critters in that water. We have that all over the island, but to take advantage of those water bodies for pure viewing pleasure and for relaxation is an added benefit. So another view looking over that event lawn with the community facilities in the background, again, perched above the water body. You can see that sculptural fountain upper left. Again, that is in clear view underneath the canopy of the trees from the parkway, but it's 400 yards away. So we don't have traffic noise to deal with setback this far from the parkway. And then lower right, you can see the tower, and off of this image would be the small amphitheater. A couple of other views, again, hovering above 278, looking down on that expanded water. You can see a bit of an activity terrace, a dining terrace, and those multi-use facilities. All the parking comes directly off of Dillon Road into parking lots. Again, it's segregated from the larger body of the park. Moving to the next district is what we're calling the Island Heritage. Again, I shared with you the importance of the historic neighborhoods that are in this district. This is physically, literally the backyard of the Grassland neighborhood, and there is a distinct need we've come to realize through the public process for outdoor gathering, for multi-use space, for open air market for the sale of foodstuffs and crafts, communal gardens for legitimate growing of food stock, and also outdoor gathering. You can see these buildings in the lower right are the relocated rebuilt St. James Church and a relocated schoolhouse. But it's in close proximity to the Union Cemetery on the flank, but it's also in direct connection to this island heritage. We think this is a great opportunity for one, segregating parking, but bringing parking together and taking advantage of all of that parking for certain events, but give a distinct place where we can celebrate the island heritage in a garden that is specific to that historic heritage. So this is images from the church. We've slightly refined their site plan to make it fit into this corner. But the Union Cemetery is directly adjacent there too. A multi-use community space. We've heard from the community that there is a need for, specifically in the historic neighborhoods who have depended upon their churches and those facilities for venues for weddings and for funerals and for receptions and for graduations, and that there's not a place large enough or more centrally located for that community to gather. We think this is a great opportunity to do just that. Open air market, again, for the sales of goods. These are de facto shelters when there's nothing happening. They're roofed structures, but open air. Cultural gardens, I think that should be legitimate food production that we're putting on people's tables. Not just a museum piece by definition. It can speak to our culture and history, but it also has a current day use to it. A garden shed and pavilion, think of this as open air shelter, but it's also serves a function vis-a-vis the garden and some of the activities that can happen there. So as a whole, there's convenient parking, there's drop-off, there's opportunity for pop-up tents, there's opportunity for food trucks. Portions of this can be open while other portions are not. It can all come together as one large venue, subdivided. This parking and open ground that is adjacent to the lower left of this image will also accommodate the concourse parking that heretofore has used the fairways of the golf course, the now closed golf course, to satisfy their vendor parking. We can still accommodate that, but in a more organized fashion. Next, the Cultivator Landscapes. Again, Union Cemetery is on the lower right. The Parkway is bottom of the image. We've created a series of more formal gardens. We've got a promenade that leads views, is also activity space from the Parkway. Doesn't touch the edge of the vehicular pathway, but we do have a trail system that interconnects all of this. These are cultivated gardens. We've used the term Monet garden in the past. A number of formal garden expressions can be put in this area. We've got the Alameda, which is a longer promenade with swinging benches, garden space in the center, leading people from what would be an improved intersection at Union Cemetery into the heart of the park and to the gardens themselves. The promenade might have low water features, again, to draw the eye to the central water feature and the lagoon. A Monet or a formal garden. Cultivated gardens, including low country. We might have native low country plants that are intentionally planted and exhibited. Throughout this, we can also have an arboretum and showcase some of the wonderful trees that we have on the site and augment that population. And take advantage of the water bodies with aquatic plants as well. Not causing people to step into that water, but allowing people to observe those plants from the edge of the water. And then along the riparian edges, Again, this is a water course, this is a golf course that needs to be reclaimed, if you will. We can take what is a drainage ditch and turn it back into what should be a stream corridor, and then plant that and be able to circulate around it appropriately. Again, as I mentioned, we can accommodate the concourse as well for their staging area. We've got open fields. We also have structured parking, and we can get them off of and back onto Union Cemetery and out to the Parkway in pretty efficient fashion. A view looking down that Alameda to the fountain and to the event lawn beyond, the Great Lawn. On the Dillon Road side of things, we've got the opportunity for the active play. That's a place where we have open and dry ground. We'll take advantage of the parking coming in off of Dillon Road to allow for parking for play area, for the yard or open play, and interactive water, as we've done so successfully on this island and elsewhere. A nature play, maybe this is something that speaks more to the natural environment of the property and not a packaged play area. Place for picnicking and for classes of kids and families to congregate. A yard for active play. There isn't proposed to be any structured or league play here, but we've got sufficient area for open play. We think it's a great opportunity for more human scale things that don't take up a lot of land use, and simple bocce courts, or certainly chess tables and oversized chess games, things that will draw other constituencies to the park. Again, this parking is centrally located, so once you get out of your automobile, there's a lot of things that you can do, a lot of places that you can walk through a comprehensive trail system. Again, the eco park, that's the majority of the park. This was largely golf course. You can even read in this plan some of the fairways that exist. We've got some remedial action to do with healing some of the past wounds of the golf course. There's an opportunity for a legitimate eco center, a series of small buildings or sheds that we can preach the gospel of the natural systems, learning opportunities, not just for school-age children, but for tourists and the community as a whole. This can be our trailhead, if you will, for people to park, get out of their automobile, get off their bicycle, put it in a rack, and walk the trail system and learn about the great aquatic and flora and fauna of the place. So we don't have to do much in this area other than deal with water quality and put back some trees and plants that are maybe more appropriate to the natural systems than what was planted as part of the golf course. But we are blessed with a great stand of mature trees, and we think there's great opportunity for habitat as well. To that end, we can create a series of blinds, observation decks, pavilions, where we can rest, relax, take advantage of those environments. And there may be an expansion of the wetland that exists along that north leg of Union Cemetery, and take a boardwalk across that wetland so that we can use that as an educational opportunity. Wetlands are also beautiful, beautiful places. And since we have this beautiful canopy, there's a great opportunity to have a canopy walk, to take people again off the ground plane and put them up into the canopy of the trees and observe the park and the eco park from a completely different vantage point. Again, another donor opportunity. That may be a place where someone steps up to help us fund such a thing. So in perspective view, you can see hovering above the parking area how we can get out of our automobile, access these buildings, be directly into the aquatic area of the park, and have a complete circuit through this natural area. And then a view of that of that elevated canopy walk. So the bird's eye view of it all together is this, again, hovering above Ashmore Tract, looking to the northeast. You can see that this is a sizable piece of property, but we've attempted to segregate the uses for sake of the context and the surroundings, but also tie them all together with commonly used parking, trail system, gardens. There's literally something for everybody in this park. And I think that's the benefit of being centrally located. Again, I mentioned some of the site-wide things. Those are the geographic subdivisions. Site-wide, we've got ecological improvements to be had. There's some vegetation that we need to preserve and enhance. There's others that need to come out that are invasives or non-natives. So we look to repopulate and replant certain areas. The fairway clearings may very well be reforested. We're increasing the surface water. We're increasing the kidneys, if you will, of the island. We've got the opportunity to contain and filter and then slowly release more water than that piece of property currently accommodates. So we're increasing the canopy cover, we're increasing the native habitat. So I think we can create a place that is for people, but also heal the environment at the same time. Art opportunities. Great opportunity for public art expression. We have that on this island. One man's opinion, I think public art needs to be carefully curated. But I think that's all I'll say about that. But we've got an opportunity within the gardens, within these more public places to exhibit art examples. Pathways throughout. This isn't just paved asphalt trails through this area. There's a number of surface types. This is more diagrammatic than will actually be built. There's a lot more design that needs to go into this, but it can be concrete, it can be crushed shells, it could be pine straw, it could be screenings, it can be wood decks, it can be asphalt, and certainly specialty pavement in certain areas, around the fountain being an example of that. We've got parking. We've got almost 600 cars of parking, not to mention some of the what we're proposing to be on-street parking on the surrounding streets. So people can pull Dillon as an example on northbound Dillon. You can stop your car, pull over the curb, get out, and walk into the park. Today, there's no walking into this park because it used to be a fairway and a fence and overgrown vegetation. So we're looking to open up the edges so that folks that live in this neighborhood, in these neighborhoods, can literally walk to their neighborhood park. If you're coming from afar, there's sufficient auto parking to be had. So we know that Ashmore has got some PSD utility improvement needs and demands, but we couldn't help but to link Ashmore to this, and I'll come back to that in half a minute. But speaking of Dillon Road, we think it's important to deal with the edges, open up that park edge into the park, have some on-street parking, maybe slow some of the Dillon and Union Cemetery traffic speeds down, have a multi-use path that is adjacent to the road but separate from the road, more of a park experience than a road experience. These intersections, we've got to get people safely across the streets. We've observed from crash and accident and pedestrian and bicycle conflict data that these are two very dangerous intersections. Certainly Dillon Road is. We would propose, we'll have to see if it stands, a warrant that Union Cemetery be signalized, so we're physically stopping traffic to allow for pedestrians to cross. If there is connection through Ashmore to Marshland and all those neighborhoods in Marshland, we think it's a great opportunity for them to take advantage of this park as well. Relative to Ashmore, we've got some program that we want to fit into Ashmore, and that is an 18-hole disc golf course. and that will have to be strategically routed through trees. It's done all the time. Provide some pavilions and comfort facilities, a trail system so that we can get from Marshland to Union Cemetery. And should Port Royal Plaza redevelop over time, great way of connecting all of those folks to the open space and park. So this is a conceptual routing of how the golf course would fit in. Unless you're out there with one of those discs in hand, you're likely not even going to know that there is a disc golf course there. Small signs, baskets that receive the discs, and that's about as invasive as those get. This is a very sensitive environment. We've got to remain that way. PSD has got some plans for a new utility building and some routing of utilities. We think we can also complement this with another pavilion and comfort station. So that's the park and its systems. We couldn't help ourselves but to look at what has been done nationally and regionally, give you some indication, pardon me for hitting that button, of other parks that are done around the country of this magnitude. One on the left is Tulsa, Oklahoma at 66 acres. Sizable park, incredibly expensive park. I'll come to that in a moment. Railroad Park in Birmingham, and also Summit Park in Blue Ash, which is suburban Cincinnati. And we were fortunate enough to have designed that park. So to give you some scale of costs, and I'm here to tell you we haven't gotten to the costing piece of this yet. Next time we get together, we will talk costing and phasing. But that 66-acre park in Tulsa was $460 million. That is an anomaly. That is probably the most expensive park per acre that I've experienced. But I needed to bookend this conversation with that. Going down to Summit Park is a $60 million park on 130 acres. So you start to frame what some of these sizes and costs per acre are. We use a rule of thumb as we do this type of park design as $1 million an acre is a place to start. You can see some of these are less, some of these are more. All depends on program, all depends on what Mother Nature has delivered to us. We're fortunate to have this plethora of open space and former golf course that we don't have to do a lot to half of the park. Local and regional, our Low Country Celebration Park is 10 acres. It's got 3 magnificent pieces of architecture and a world-class play area. Unity Park in Greenville, which just opened last week, I do believe. Again, we're fortunate enough to be involved with that, a 40-acre park in historic neighborhood district, and then our 97-acre. So you can see the program that we have in this park versus the programs in those others. We have got a lot of stuff in this park, but I think it fits nicely. Again, we've got the luxury of acreage, but we've very strategically placed every component. To give you a sense of cost, Low Country Celebration, $14 million or $1.4 million per acre. That is a very intensely developed park. It's all manicured, and it is a wonderful park, by the way. Unity Park is $38 million, or just under $1 million an acre, and here we sit with 97 acres. Now, do the math, hearing what Brian just said a minute ago, at $1 million an acre, is this going to be a $97 million park? No way. Again, we've got the majority of this park is golf course that we're going to restore into and rejuvenate into environmental park. So we're not manipulating all 97 acres of this. We're being very tactful as to what becomes manicured landscape and what goes to natural systems. So stay tuned. Next time we get together, we'll have a breakdown of what those costs are. Like an automobile, you can buy the base model and then you can buy options along the way. Some of those options can and should be added over time. We'll have a listing of donor opportunities. I think we would be well within our rights to go to the local and regional community, our corporate partners and institutional partners. This has got something for everybody in this community, and see if we can get folks to start to play along with us relative to financing this park. I think we have created a best-in-class park. As you combine Mid-Island with Ashmore, we're looking at over 170 acres of green space intentionally planned in the middle of our town. And that's an opportunity that doesn't happen often. So kudos to you all for recognition of what this could be. Our next steps, then I'll go back and field some questions. This meeting, take your comments for sure. We're looking to, in this summer, to come back to you with some phasing options, some costing, some logic behind what happens first, what happens second, what happens third. I think that a good fiscal policy suggests this happens over time. It's never going to be any cheaper than to build it all at one time, but that's a big construction project. And I think we would be smart in sneaking up on this over time. Establish those budgets and schedules. Once this body and the community commits to a phase and a budget, again, there's a lot more design that needs to be done for that initial phase of construction, finalizing design, construction documentation, permitting, bidding, getting contractors on board, and then starting that construction. Anywhere within that chronology, we can have a groundbreaking to announce to the community that we have a park that is coming online, and here's where it's going to be, and here's what it's going to look like, and turn this into a legitimate celebration, because I think it's celebration worthy. With that, I'll go back to this and answer any questions that anyone may have.
So it's this time?
Oh.
Including, if you have an idea of a name, let us know as you go through it.
Okay, well, thank you. So it's super exciting. You can see all the work that's been done. I think it addresses everything that it needs to address. A lot of my questions were somewhat answered as you were going through. I think one of my first reaction was to the dislocation of our four-legged and winged friends who make that area their home. It seems as though there's some opportunities, but I would be certainly very sensitive to not invading space that is otherwise occupied. Question I had was, as you were going through it, from the Great Lawn, or I think that's what it was called, to the play activity area, is that the same space? Or is that two separate areas?
Two separate areas, but
Is-
they're a modest distance apart.
But it would generally in the same,
Yes.
I was trying to track it.
Oh, there's a good example. That event space is, I hope you can see that on that image behind. The play space is right across that pedestrian bridge, right there, Councilwoman.
Okay.
And then parking and spray pool and community facilities, they're all clustered in that area so that we can come in off of Dillon Road, park an automobile, and that is all conveniently located.
So the Great Lawn is where the heart of the track is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
ma'am.
Okay, so it is, okay. I know this is a question for later, but that is unprogrammed activities to take place in that area as, right? It's pick up ball, whatever, picnics.
Unprogrammed recreational activities.
Unprogrammed
right.
recreation space, okay. The garden, I loved the idea of the vegetable gardens. How does that work?
Operationally, organizationally, a number of ways. They can be directed by the town. They can be community organization based. I think in any event, it should be a partnership among those. There's opportunities for partnering with our local restaurateurs to take some of those foodstuffs, literally put them on tables. There's an opportunity to put them on tables right there in that community building. There's opportunity to engage the local neighborhoods to to physically, emotionally own those plots, to harvest those goods, to pick those apples and peaches. It isn't, it can be, but in my view, it isn't meant to be a museum piece. It's meant to be a place where we grow food.
Yeah, a work at garden. How much land do you envision that is?
Oh, boy. Yeah, 2 acres. You can grow a lot of tomatoes in 2 acres, by the way.
And I guess through the ecological portions of the design, there are thoughts in terms of how we collect water, reuse water for irrigation and that around that same kind of.
Yes, ma'am, we've had that conversation again. That's at the next tier of design, but all of the parking lots are meant to be free-flowing and porous pavements. We're going to manage every drop of storm water that touches this, in addition to everything that runs onto this site from off-site and then finds its way to deep water. Relative to sanitary systems, again, that's the next level of detail, but there's an opportunity for us to develop this park offline if we so chose to do so. You know, we've thinking at this juncture that we'll bring in potable water and sanitary sewer for restroom devices, but there are parks developed all the time that are completely offline. Is the answer someplace in between? That's going to be up to this body to decide. But this needs to, at every turn, need to speak to sustainability and resiliency. If a tree falls, a tree stays. Reuse what we have, use the right locally sourced materials to build everything here. We need to be really smart and crafty about it.
So those are all great answers. And I love the design of the park. There are a few elements that, you know, want to learn a little bit more about. And for this first presentation, to me, you have done more than create a best-in-class park. This is a world-class park, and it is worthy of Hilton Head. And I appreciate all the efforts that everyone has put into getting us to this point. I'm looking forward to it growing and really being the heart of our island. Anyway, you know, I'm going to have to ask that you give me a little bit more time
Okay.
on that.
David?
Yep. Please don't reflex with names. I just think we have to be very careful, and that gets into branding.
Sure does.
And what Tammy was just saying and asking questions about the reuse of water and so on, I think there is an unbelievable opportunity here to reinforce the community brand of environmental stewardship in every level, in every decision that we make in developing this plan. So I'm not going to try to second guess myself. I think this requires a good deal of thought to understand all the aspects and relationships. So I'm a little uncomfortable parsing the different things. I will say, however, that I like your segmentation of the site and the priorities that you've established within that segmentation, so I think that's good. I think realistically, we have to anticipate that this site is going to be phased over time. So I'm very interested in the consultant's opinion of what comes first. I think the fundamental question for me might be, are all these community facilities important to this community? And if they are, is this the best location for them? I think we need to answer those questions because a lot of the money is in the three-dimensional architecture that you're proposing. You had a photograph of sculptures, and I think the extinct Carolina parakeet that you showed would be an absolute must in this park. You showed community facilities and mentioned funerals. I think there is a real, and the reason I'm bringing this up is my mother's funeral. It was in a Hartford, Connecticut Rose Garden public facility that looked out into an environment like this, and it was very appropriate. So I think that can be done. I will tell you, I had a visceral reaction when you said buy a tower. I absolutely resist the idea of commercial organizations buying facilities in our public parks. If it's a nonprofit, a Rotary Club, I feel differently about that. But I think we as a community should resist the idea that we're going to put the name of something that doesn't relate to our community vision and values directly. So I'm against that one. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Try to go in some type of order here. One of the things that Celebration Park did that we don't talk a lot about is it forced us to slow the traffic down and improve that area in terms of safety, right? So that's one of the biggest things that I'm excited about with this venture. I can appreciate us maybe forcing the hand of a traffic light at the Union Cemetery intersection. But I'd also offer up that, maybe some type of overpass crossing is still something we may need to discuss. That area, if in fact we're going to put an emphasis on revitalizing the entire area, we should expect that there's going to be more and more traffic and pedestrian traffic. So I wouldn't want to throw that one out so quickly. With the cultural experience, I know we've shown St. James there with the community center. I'm excited about that. I'd also offer up, I know we've been having some conversations with Sandalwood Pantry. Maybe there's an opportunity here also. Don't want to lose sight of that, particularly with the new findings of our limitations with our town-owned land at this point. Maybe we need to re-engage on that topic, but at least the conversations around St. James need to start moving forward more quickly at this point, if we're this far along conceptually, right? And the other is, I understand that it's been, I guess, a path of least resistance as to why the park is so much further along than the district. Okay, I got my head wrapped around that. But when we get to the point of next steps, particularly with the budgeting, in my mind, the two have to work together, because I'm terribly afraid of $1 million per acre. Okay, we understand that that's not going to be such, but let's say $500,000 per acre, right? That number scares me when we're talking about just the park. Okay, but when we start to talk about the improvements in the area, particularly the connectors, what we're doing with the streets and that sort of thing, it now becomes more palatable for us as a community. I understand that this is the pin in the center of what we're focusing on, but at the same time, in order for the rest of it to work, that investment that we spoke of earlier has to be smart and intentional. Those are my comments. And as far as the name is concerned, Mr. Mayor,
No name.
no.
We dropped the name for a while.
Well, here's what I was going to offer.
Yes. Mark and John.
So, because this is our first, as far as replanning or redeveloping districts, let's have some fun with it. Okay, there's some opportunity here, I think, for us to engage with our community as we move forward, instead of just a lot of drawings and soon to be big numbers for us to decide if we're going to spend money. But this is the opportunity. We're changing the game here for a long term. As Brian's mentioned earlier, this is something that's going to be sustainable. It's going to be there for generations. So let's have some fun with how we figure out what the name is.
Gotcha. Mr. Bill?
Thank you. First, a very creative, I think very comprehensive. I think there's something here for everybody in the community. I have some respectful suggestions. One, as you start planning this project in more detail, the inclination may be to hit the park right away and then have that be the catalyst for the surrounding area. I mean, that could make a lot of sense. But the cash call for that is going to be significant. And the question would be, where are the offsetting revenues for this kind of a project? So I'm really tagging along with Alex here. If we did this alone, it would be a diamond in the rough, correct? So I think what we have to do is develop an economic model and simulate this project to include Northridge and Port Royal. And what would be the immediate impacts in those two areas? And I think the immediate impacts could be significant, and it could actually inure economically to the benefit of the community. And I don't view Ashmore as an afterthought, because when you ask the question, what does it back into? It backs into a tired Port Royal Plaza. But if that becomes a neighbor, what does that do? If I own property there, I may start to think, wow, I'm going to reinvest. When that lease is up, I'm going to put something special in there. So this is not a simple project. There's a lot of economic interdependence here. And that's the tough side, but the good side is if it's done right, it's going to have a positive splash for the whole area. And that's, I think, why we're calling this a district development. To the park itself, I think a lot of time has to be spent on the infrastructure, maybe the boring part that's underground. And my point here is that when you start doing infrastructure on a project like this, you don't put a pump station in for one little pond. You put a pumping facility in for the entire project. So, yes, some of this can be done incrementally, but a number of things are going to have to be done all at once. So that's going to help shape the capital call for the project. So I think a lot of attention has to be done with that. And I would ask the question too, even though this is going to be owned by the town, let's look at revenue generation. Is there a possibility that some of this activity could in fact generate revenue? If I wanted to rent something here for my daughter's wedding, I would expect to pay for it. So I think revenue generation should be put into the model. And then I think doing a logical build-out scenario is going to be critical, because you can't do the economic model without the logical build-out model. So I would really like to see what that looks like. And one thing I think that may be missing here is when you think of, hopefully, of the surrounding high-density housing in the area, high-density housing means very small, if anything, backyards. But there'll be kids, there'll be families, and there'll be dogs. How about a dog park here? I think those are my comments, but I mean to be positive here, because this is really a game changer for this community. And I think it's something we should do. I'm not surprised about the cost, but if we spread it over a period of time, I think we'll start developing a lot of community understanding, a lot of sense of value, and that value will create excitement as well as economic benefit to the entire community. Thank you.
I think I totally agree with Alex and Bill. Brian and staff, this is outstanding work. It's much more than I would have expected. But I don't feel prepared to really critique this because I feel like I just took a drink out of a fire hose. And I'd like to have a few days or a week or two to really dive into your slides, and I'll have a lot more to say after that, except the concept of community gardens is really good. And if you want to look at one that is enormously successful, look inside Seapines across from the Lawton Stables. They have a waiting list of a couple of dozen people wanting to get a plot in Seapines. And all I can say is it's an incredible asset and it's very, very popular. I like your idea of heart of the tract. I like taking that a step further, heart of the island. And I think we have to recognize this truly will be a destination park. And with that go all sorts of challenges, but most of them good. So Brian, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks after I have a chance to go through your deck.
Take as much time as you need.
He's taking a plane next week. He can take it with him and read it on the plane.
He could, it's some light bedtime reading.
Glenn?
Thank you. I am excited. Build it. I'm ready. This is such a spectacular concept plan here. And I can't begin to express how enthusiastic I am about the ideas. We've talked about some details, and I've got a few details as well. The naming opportunity, that is vital. I'm ready to get rid of the term Mid-Island. There's nothing creative about that. It's maybe geographic, but that's it. But I want to pick on the culture of this community and the history of this community in creating a name for the park. And I'm thinking there should be a community contest around this with some expertise to do the judging on it. Nothing spectacularly unique about that idea, but it is something that might work. I see the economic need for phasing, but I hope it doesn't drag out long because I don't want this to be a construction site. I want this to be a park. And so we need professional input from our consultants here on, does it have to be phased? And if it does have to be phased, this is how we would go about doing it. You showed a couple of examples of towers. None of those had any appeal to me. The idea of a tower definitely has appeal to me. And I want to throw out the notion of a treehouse. But something like that could get people up to where they could pick up the whole scale of this park, and the beauty of it may have some appeal. The island heritage feature here is truly outstanding and sorely needed in this community. We are so proud to have Mitchellville here, and this just further complements the cultural heritage that we treasure here in this community. And so I salute you for your concepts about this and the way you have laid it out. Some of our citizens have come up with a concept of an eco trail. that would tie together various features of the broader island. I don't see that eco trail being included in this, and I'd like to know if there is a reason for that, or if it is still, this is too broad a concept to get down to that point. I hear my friend David Ames talking about resisting commercial investment here. It seems to me that by doing that, we are putting the entire burden clearly on the town, our tax base, and so forth. And so I hear the concerns about how it might appear, but I think we could manage that, and I would like to see it developed and studied. I don't have a conclusion on this at all, but if we can draw on other sources of revenue, we can build it faster, maybe in my lifetime. And so I'm really have an open mind about that. There's been comment here about, do we build the park and they will come, or do we develop the park at the same time we're developing the district? I'm no planner. I don't know how these things work, but I can observe what has happened at Celebration Park. The town, yes, relocated some roads and changed some roadways and so forth, but the private economy has developed around it because they saw the attraction of the park. This is going to have an equal, in many ways, greater draw to that commercial development around it in the district. So that too, I have an open mind, but I'm inclined to say right now that we would build the park first and allow the district to develop around it with managed concepts like our consultants are coming up with. So, Brian, many, many thanks to you and your team for a lot of creative ideas. We are very fortunate to be able to draw on your expertise here, and your expertise is showing. So thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Let's go to the public now. Lance, you can go first because you're the neighbor.
Mayor, while Lance is coming up, can I just make one quick observation because it got brought up a couple of times in terms of sensitivity points. One that I'm struggling, and I've written it down and circled it and drawn around it, is the idea of the tower and that it being above the canopy. And my visceral reaction to the idea that we break that that bond that we have with our past, that nothing gets elevated above our canopy, that we're reasonable in our height and keeping within our environment. I just want to put that out there, that that is something that I'm incredibly sensitive to and had a visceral reaction to. So having said that.
Thank you. Lance?
Thank you, Mayor. I would say thank you, Brian and Andrew, town staff, for a wonderful layout and project that you guys are going to hopefully continue with and move forward. I know for Port Royal, this would be an asset to the community to have this at our front door. I think it's going to be an asset to our residents to be able to bike and walk. And for those that need to drive, they have the ability to drive and have easy access to it. I still think there's challenges that town council and consultants will continue to have to face. I think the access and adding another light will continue to present challenges. Within a half a mile distance, you're going to have 4 red lights. I go to Alex's comments of looking at other methods to get across the road and around the road without continuing to add red lights to solve or relieve problems. I thought the conceptual design of the overpass was well done. There are definitely areas within these 2 parcels of Ashmore and the Mid-Island Tract to get people across the road. There are also options to have the road go over people. So I think those options should be explored and not just say the easiest option is to throw in a red light at Union Cemetery. I think that's going to create problems coming out of Port Royal. I think that creates challenges traffic-wise, not only from Dillon, but the whole way through the Port Royal red light down to Folly Field. That is also, could also push traffic then through Matthews, which would have to be taken into consideration as well. But overall, I think you guys have really taken the corridor and looked at it well. Looking at the areas coming up Union Cemetery where you have the pathway leading up to the fountain, that's going to be very visible as that road turns. You're going to see right down that corridor. So I think you guys done a really nice job. Thank you.
Terry? Got to stand up, Terry. Get the big kids.
I heard my name. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got about 6 pages of notes here, so I'll write those up and share them all with you tonight. I didn't hear anybody say, great idea. I'm using up my time here. Just a couple of comments, mostly about the Mid-Island District planning. This is all very exciting. The presentation was wonderful and comprehensive, and the questions were excellent. Just a couple of things. Please don't forget connectivity from the Mid-Island Park or tracks, the Ashmore, and that incredible series from Ashmore into the park, Mid-Island Park, and then up to Northridge Tract, which is also owned by us, by the town. So don't forget to think bigger and longer and further out down to Chaplin and then to Shelter Cove, and as part of a longer-term Island Greenway. So think about that now, not later. I think one of the most simple, quickest, most satisfying things you could do right away is to start doing the pathways, start connecting, and start getting people used to that wonderful possibility of a series of parks. You can do that now in the next year. Doesn't cost much. Maybe it doesn't cost, well, it doesn't cost much. So don't forget that. Proactively, please focus your efforts and your thinking on marketing the Mid-Island, not for tourism, but to aim at developers, both commercial and both housing and any other kind of developer or whoever might make a difference to the Mid-Island effort. Always stick to the vision for inclusiveness and democracy and all of those other factors that Brian mentioned. But just keep giving or start getting a clear vision yourselves and get that vision out to the community, but also to all those people who can really make some things happen in the Mid-Island District. This can be an incredible template if you get it done, or if you even get it started, an amazing template for other parts of the island in your planning going forward for the next 10, 15 years. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Risa? Risa?
As a resident in Port Royal, I'm really excited to have this come to my backyard. I had spoken to Brian a while ago about having lived in Blue Ash, Ohio, and having this wonderful Summit Park, unknowing that they developed it. So I'm very familiar with that concept, and I understand how the community and the businesses around it have developed. So I'm really looking forward to this. I have a couple of very specific comments more to the Mid-Island Initiative. Multi-use paths, we had a conversation, you guys had a conversation a few days ago about safety of paths with e-bikes on them, and the concept was brought up to widen those paths. The image that you showed felt like a really narrow path. If we could get to 12 feet, that would be amazing, so that we can improve safety for those shared use paths, especially in this area where we're expecting to have high levels of congestion. Secondly, being that I live in that neighborhood, I use a lot of the local businesses for my services. And one of the things I saw when we got the economic opportunity zone was that local businesses were forced out because of that redevelopment. And I'd like to ensure that there's some way to protect our existing businesses in Northridge and Port Royal Plaza specifically, so that when those areas are redeveloped, rents are likely to go up, but how are they going to be able to maintain their businesses? They're our local service providers. We want to encourage them. We want that business development. We don't want big box retailers, but will they be able to afford to stay in the neighborhood? And that's an unintended potential consequence, and I would hope that we would find a way to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoagland?
Good morning, Skip Hoagland, Windmill Harbor. We don't just need redevelopment strategy or character visioning. We need an entire island master land plan we have never developed. I've lived on Hilton Head for 47 years. I'm sorry, South Carolina DOT, the Corridor Committee, and our entire island community has ended up in this unbearable traffic situation for all residents, tourists, business owners, and their workers. It has in fact caused many accidents, life-threatening situation for Windmill Harbor residents, native islanders living on Highway 278. Charles Frazian's vision for a low-density, high-end resort retirement community has basically been destroyed. And unfortunately, there are no real good solutions, nor have I heard of one from anyone. Fact is, we have been placed in this situation by our 30-year town manager, Steve Riley, and kicked the can down the road, politicians, past mayors in the building, real estate development business, real estate agent with horses in the race who have never created a master land plan. Past town manager Steve Riley assembled this committee to take the heat off of him for his failed leadership and no master land plan. No master land plans. And not just the town, but Bluffton and Beaufort. We're all heading in the same direction as Hilton Head. We should have created this land plan 30 years ago when we had 2 pounds in a 5-pound bag, not waited till we have 6 pounds in a 5-pound bag and heading for 10 pounds and try to fix it. We can't fix where we are. We can only force our officials to do a master land plan to stop the 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag insanity. Folks, we have one bridge and one road all the way to I-95 and have been handed this overflowing bag caused by Steve Riley, Lisa Salka, and other officials. And unfortunately, there is no real good fix. Firing Steve Riley is something I called for many years ago. Now we end up with another insider from Bluffton, Mark Orlando, and lawyer Josh Gruber from Beaufort taking us the same direction. My idea to stop the insanity and the irresponsibility of our elected officials is we force and formulate a master land plan quickly so we can prevent the 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag from occurring. We have simply allowed overdevelopment, too many timeshares, condos, and tourists for the capacity of one road and one bridge to I-95. And we can't fix this, which is a darn shame. Many of us who moved here 30 to 50 years ago did not sign up for Myrtle Beach, Charleston. We don't want all this stuff we're looking at. We never wanted it. No master land plans have caused a ripple effect all the way to I-95, harming workers, residents, tourists negatively. If it doesn't stop, businesses will keep closing, workers will look for jobs off the island, tourists will leave, and residents will move away. Lastly, the environmental damage caused by this overflowing 5-pound bag has caused severe pollution to our environment, like the May River and Broad Creek, et cetera, et cetera. that took millions of years to create. We ruined all of this in 30 years. And yes, stop the illegal tax funding, use, and theft of millions of our tax funds by the fraudulent Hilton Head Bluffton Chamber. If we had no chamber, CVB or DMO, tourism numbers would remain the same. Technology, local search, thousands of Facebook accounts produces tourism, not this $500,000 salary fraudster, chamber head Bill Miles living in a $2 million house in Indigo Run. What we need to do is take all that money, the millions, maybe 60 million we've handed him over 30 years, and we need to put that money into the park. Let's stop paying that tax heist and tax scam, and then let's build that park.
Thank you.
I'm telling you, we need to fix what's broken, and I'd like to pass out something for the town council,
Rather
not
you
the other
don't, Mr.
people.
Logan. Just drop them there, we'll distribute them later. Next, who would like to speak next? Did he scare you all the way? Anybody want to speak next? Yes, sir. Guy's walking the door and wants.
You must know a lot.
Peter.
Pete Nardi, General Manager, Hilton Head PSD. I just wanted to, I wanted to thank the town staff and Brian and his team. We've been in discussions about potential long-term water supply assets related to Ashmore, possibly related to Mid-Island. I know you're sort of not there yet in terms of the concept planning, but we've just been appreciative of having the conversations. A lot of attractiveness of these parcels for both our PSD as well as Broad Creek PSD, about 2/3 of the island, in terms of proximity to our existing distribution system, and also how some of the hydrogeology looks in this area for wells, et cetera. So I just wanted to thank everybody for having an ear on that as we move forward.
Thank
Appreciate it.
Anybody else like to say a few words? Yes, sir.
I don't know if it's ever been brought up before. Raz Reed, I live next door. I do a lot of bike riding on the bike pass. And I don't know if you're aware of it or this has ever been brought up, but these electrical bikes that are just proliferating on the island are really dangerous on the bike pass. They really are. And there was a sign up there, I think about a year ago, it said no motorized vehicles on bike pass. But I don't know if you guys ride bikes on the bike pass. I do. It's become a real, I think it's very dangerous. Those things go 25, 30 miles an hour. And if you look around, they're all over the island now. They don't belong on the bike pass. Has it ever been brought up before?
Yes.
Okay.
We're working on it, sir.
Oh, you're working on it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, Brian, I thank you and your crew very much. This is probably the most exciting project we ever had. It will definitely be the biggest one for years and years to come. Besides for your team and everything, this is going to be an important part for the council members individually to get involved into this work. Everybody has ideas, different ideas, good ideas, but we have to work together in making this a success. You can do your part, Brian. We have to do our part at the same time you're doing yours, Brian. So I thank you very much. I thank the council members in advance for all the work they're going to put into this project. And I thank the citizens for coming out today. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.